So I'm going to do things a little bit differently here. I'm going to start by doing some of the later exercises because they actually contain some things that we haven't necessarily talked about. I know Aidan's mentioned these things through a few people, but let's do them for everyone. So the first one that does something a bit strange is the stubborn asker. So the point of this is that it will keep asking for an input until it gets a good input. So that's useful if you want to say, give me a number between 1 and 10, and the person says 11. You don't just like crash out or use a number that's wrong. It'll say, actually, that's wrong, give me a better one. So the first thing we want to do is get a decent message. So we'll say message equals, and then we'll write a message. Let's say, give me a number between. Now, I'm going to use string formatting, and now string formatting is really useful, and we can use it to make strings really nice and make it really easy. I think I've mentioned this in class, but let's go through a little bit of a classy string format. So we could say dot format like this. Sorry, and like that. And then we're using positional arguments to decide which one goes in there. So that's the first one, so it takes the first argument, and that's the second one, so it takes the second argument. But we can actually we can name these arguments, so we'll say between low and high. Now this is a little bit confusing because it's just a coincidence that they're the same name, but you probably will use the same name most times. So we'll say low equals, and if we use named arguments here, high equals like that, then that thing will print out the actual message. So we can check that by just printing it. Print message. Okay, now let's do that. Stubborn asker, give me a number between 30 and 45. And it actually works, it asks for it, that's good. So we know that our message is working properly. Now we're not actually asking for anything, so let's actually ask for something. Now if we ask for something straight off, then we won't necessarily know, we won't be able to deal with it. But let's do it anyway, and we'll fix the problem when it comes up. So we'll say input number equals raw input message. So that'll ask us for a raw input with the message. Now let's put a space on there just to make things pretty. So that will make sure that the thing at the end has a space. Now one of the problems we're going to get here is that we want a number back, and we are going to get a string from raw input. So we're going to need to int that whole chunk there. So we're casting the message that the value we get back from raw input into an int. And so let's just check that again. Print input number. Now if we run that, stubborn asker will get stuck and nothing will happen. So this is a problem, and so in order to be able to run this, to test this thing, we actually need to do it in the command, in the terminal. So give me a second and I'll just flick to terminal. Okay, let's make that a bit bigger. Okay, so if we run those tests, no, we don't want to run the test at all. We want to run the code. So Python week 3 exercise 1.py, and it's now asking us, so it's not giving us anything back, so it's asking us now for a number between 30 and 45. Now if I say 25, it will just print 25 and keep going on its way. Right, so back in here we need to find a way of deciding if that number is the right size or not. So let's print if this number is the right size. So first thing we want to check is low less than input number, and let's also print, we can put a list of things to print in. So let's see if input number is also less than high. So we'll save that, pop over to the other window, and we'll run that again. And so give me a number between 30 and 45. So if we just say 25 again, then it's false that it's less than, and true that it's false that it's less than low, more than low, and true that it is less than high. So this is kind of gets a bit confusing. So one way we can do this in Python is that, because see we've got input number here twice, we can delete one of those and just say that basically is input number between high and low. So let's copy this, and this way we'll ask twice. Now this is how we kind of don't want to do things. We don't want to have it typed out lots and lots of times. Just fix that lint error there. Right, so if we save that, flick to the terminal and run the tests again. Give me a number between 30 and 45, 25. That's false because it's asking for two conditions. So if we say 32, it says true here. Okay, so that's good. We know we're in the right range, so let's get rid of that. So we want to say, instead of printing that, we want to be able to use that as our conditional. So we'll say if that's the case, if it's in the right range, we can print, and then what do we want to say? Thanks, looks good. So let's format that so we're actually telling the person what number they've used, because it's always nice to provide a bit of feedback. Dot format input number, and then we can say else print, and then we want to say, give people a bit more feedback again, say what the input number was. So isn't between, and then pull up low and high. Basically we take the whole end bit of that and add a bit to it. Yep. So just fix that up, get rid of that. Don't need the colon on the end, and we need to give it one more argument, which in this case will be, we can say input, and say input equals input number. Now this is, see how we can have different variable names here, because these are just local renamings of these variables that we're passing it. And oops, got to spell that right. inut is not a good variable name. There we go. So let's save that, go back to the terminal again, and we'll run that file. And we have a syntax error. So let's go back and see what it is. So here we go. Right, so the syntax error here, the syntax error that's caused here is caused by there not being a comma on the end here. We'll deal with that line being too long in a bit. It's not particularly too long, so I can handle it for the moment. So save that, flick back to the terminal, and run that. Give me a number between 30 and 45. We'll say 25. Say 25, and now says 25 isn't between 30 and 45. So let's run that again, and we'll say 35. Thanks, 35 looks good. Right, so if we run that again and we say, I don't know, 15, it just says 15 is wrong and then stops. Now we need a way to ask this question over and over again until it's just right. And the way we're going to handle that is a while loop. So we can say, now these funny while loops are, usually you say while a condition is true, do this until the condition is no longer true. But in our case, we want to run it until we break out of the loop. And there's two ways of breaking out a loop. There's a sort of break statement, which we can look at another time, because you would usually use a Boolean way of getting out. Or we can say, have a return statement inside. So if we say while, and instead of saying a Boolean condition, we say while true, and this means do this infinite number of times until we're ready to give me this number back. Now if we do this, it will just keep asking and keep asking and keep asking forever, and there's no way of stopping. But if we know that if we get the right number, we want to return it. So let's say return input number. Okay, let's save that, go back to the terminal. Takes me a while to flip over because I'm in screen capture mode, and we'll run that. Give me a number between 30 and 45. 1 isn't between that. -4 -4 isn't between that. 55 isn't between that. Well, what about 35? Thanks, 35 looks good. So let's talk through why that works quickly, and then we'll see how we go. So we come in, we ask a message, and that message isn't in the loop because we don't want it to repeat over and over again. It would define it outside the loop because it doesn't need to be defined multiple times, even though we do ask it over and over again. And then we say forever, just keep doing this. And then we ask for an input number, we convert it back to a number. So this would kind of do funny things if we tried to give it some text or something like that, but we're going to handle that in a bit in the next function. And then we can say if the input number is between low and high, then we print a thank you message using string formatting, and then we return the input number. And because a return statement jumps out of a function and stops all the execution of all the things that are happening, we don't need to worry about breaking out of this infinite while loop because it will just break it at that point. And if the input number is not between low and high, it will print another message that says, "That's not cool, mate. Give me a better number." And it will go back to the top of the while loop, and then it will run through again, go through. And so while true, you'll often see in Python when you're doing something like waiting for input from a user. It's usually a user interface type thing. So that's why you will see while true. And so that is one way of solving the stubborn asker.